here Dr. Joe Dispenza. Welcome to our Science and Knowledge TV program on TV.
Thank you so much for hosting me, Christian. I'm happy to be with you.
It is a great opportunity for us to have you as a guest on national Romanian television approaching fascinating topics.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I already made a short Romanian introduction about your training and professional background, mostly on neuroplasticity, brain function, psychology, but also on practical domains like chiropractic. My questions were born not from the view of a healthy individual who never knew the suffering, neither from the view of a suffering individual who never knew what it is to live healthy, but from the view of both of them. As an introduction to part one of our interview, please elaborate more on the next quotation. Knowledge is power. If you don't have knowledge, then you don't have any power.
Well, knowledge is the precursor to experience. And every time you learn something new, you forge new synaptic connections in your brain. In fact, learning is making new synaptic connections. And the Nobel Prize laureate Kandel in the year 2000 found that when people learn just one bit of information, they doubled the number of connections in their brain from 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. So then if they didn't review that information, if they didn't repeat it, those connections pruned apart in a matter of hours or days. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. So once you understand philosophical, theoretical, intellectual, analytical information and knowledge, the next step is for you to do something with it, to apply it, to personalize it, to demonstrate it, to initiate that knowledge into an experience. And if you can get your behaviors to match your intentions and your actions equal to your thoughts, if you can get your mind and body working together, you are going to have a new experience. Now, when you have a new experience, the experience then enriches the circuits in your brain that you understood philosophically. That's what experience does. It creates networks of neurons. But then the end product of an experience is called a feeling or an emotion. And the brain releases a chemical, and that chemical then begins to emotionally teach the body what the brain has intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body, and you begin to embody the truth of that philosophy. So this is a time in history, Christian, where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And so if knowledge is power, knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment. And common people around the world are doing the uncommon because they're not waiting for suffering. They're not waiting for crisis. They're not waiting for trauma or disease to begin the process of change and transformation. And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. And my message is, why wait? And so people are beginning to take quantum physics and neuroplasticity and neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and epigenetics and psychoneuroimmunology. The principles of each one of those sciences point the finger at possibility. And so when you begin to apply those individual sciences and create a model of understanding, what it allows the person to do is to become more empowered. And science has become the contemporary language of mysticism. And so we can begin to demystify the mystical by using those sciences because people begin to understand what they're doing and why. And when they understand the what and the why, the how gets easier.
You anticipated my next question, which is about how the brain works. First, what are the neurotransmitters, what are the neuropeptides, and their function?
Wow, okay, let's do it. You have three types of chemicals that exchange information in the brain and the body. The first type is called neurotransmitters. And in between each neuron, there is a gap. And information is translated across that gap. You have 100 billion neurons that make up your brain. And they have about 10,000 to 40,000 connections per neuron. Now, the neuron is the simplest functional unit of the nervous system, and they possess the unique ability to store and communicate information. So then, as they exchange information, they release chemicals, and those chemicals are called neurotransmitters. And some neurotransmitters wake us up and get us going. Some neurotransmitters make us feel good. Some neurotransmitters excite brain function. Other neurotransmitters suppress or inhibit brain function. And they are pretty much the chemicals that are being exchanged between neurons. So now, you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. Out of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts that you think in one day, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. So the same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the same experiences, and the same experiences produce the same emotions. And those same emotions and those same feelings drive our very same thoughts. And over time, we keep firing and wiring the same circuits in our brain. And there's a principle in neuroscience that says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. So if the person over time is thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, making the same choices, creating the same experiences, they keep firing the same networks of neurons in the same sequences, the same patterns, and the same combinations. And whenever you make the brain work in a sequence or pattern or combination, it's called mind. So the person is reproducing the same level of mind every single day, and over time, they hardwire their brain into a very finite signature. That finite signature becomes our identity, our personality. And by the time we're 35 years old, we become a set of hardwired behaviors, automatic habits, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, habits, and attitudes that function like a subconscious computer program. So then, for the most part, when you've done something so many times, your body knows how to do it as well as your brain. That's called a habit. Then most people are in the habit of being themselves. And their biology, their neurocircuitry, their neurochemistry, and even their hormonal expression tends to stay exactly the same. So the opposite is true also, that when you begin to assemble new thoughts and learn new information, those new thoughts should lead to new choices. Those new choices should lead to new behaviors. New behaviors should create new experiences, and new experiences should produce new feelings and new emotions, and those new feelings and emotions should inspire new thoughts. And that's called evolution. So then, as you begin to learn new information, you're adding a new stitch into the three-dimensional tapestry of your gray matter, and it's causing you to think differently. So then as you begin to think differently, if you begin to reproduce a thought, every time you have a thought, you make a chemical. And so if you have a happy thought or a joyful thought, you turn on a set of circuits in your brain that produces a level of mind that signals another part of your brain to produce a chemical. And those chemicals are called neuropeptides. They're made in the limbic brain, the chemical brain, or the emotional brain. And those chemicals begin to signal hormonal centers for you to begin to feel joyful or happy. Now, the moment you begin to feel joyful or happy, your brain is always monitoring your body. And your brain begins to manufacture more thoughts equal to how you feel. So if you begin to think more happy thoughts and produce more joyful thoughts, you begin to produce more joyful feelings. The problem is, 70% of the time, most people are thinking negative thoughts, or unhappy thoughts, or unworthy thoughts, or guilty thoughts, or suffering thoughts. And they turn on a different set of circuits in their brain that produces a different level of mind. And neurotransmitters then begin to influence neuropeptides. And all of a sudden, neuropeptides are released in the hypothalamus through the pituitary. And here we go. All of a sudden, those chemical signatures from the limbic brain called neuropeptides begin to activate different hormonal centers for us to begin to feel unhappy or negative or unworthy or suffering or guilty. The moment we feel those guilty thoughts or those suffering thoughts or those negative feelings and emotions, we tend to think more corresponding thoughts. And people get caught in these cycles of thinking and feeling over time. And the repetition of that cycle conditions the body to become the mind. And when the body becomes the mind, emotionally, now the body is in the past, because emotions are a record of the past. And so most people then get caught up in these loops of thinking and feeling over time, and it becomes their identity.
Please explain what happens once we begin to feel how we think and think how we feel.
Your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. And feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel. So then if you're feeling the same way every single day, that means nothing new is happening in your life. And if those feelings are driving your thoughts, and your brain is a record of the past, and emotions are a record of the past, then for the most part, you're thinking in the past. And so people get caught in these loops. They think insecure thoughts, and then they feel insecure. The moment they feel insecure, they generate more insecure thoughts. That creates more feelings of insecurity. It generates more insecure thoughts. And they get caught in these cycles of thinking and feeling for 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. And so over a period of time, they say, I am insecure. And whenever you say, I am anything, you're commanding your mind and body towards a destiny. Because thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain, and feelings are the vocabulary of your body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So the person then becomes so accustomed to feeling insecure, so accustomed to feeling guilty, so accustomed to suffering, that when it comes time to change, they would rather stay with that emotion than step out into the unknown, to take a chance into possibility, to leave the familiar emotional states and hardwired neurological programs. And so this is where true change takes place, is being able to live out in that place called the unknown and be able to begin to create a different outcome by thinking differently and feeling differently and changing a person's state of being. And all it requires is a clear intention and an elevated emotion. And you begin to change your biology from living in the past to living in the future.
But if someone had been caught on that loop for so many years, 20 years for example, which is unbelievable and unthinkable, someone to remain 20 years in suffering because the girlfriend left him without any rational reason, why can't we change that loop?
Well, this is an interesting conversation because experiences that have a high emotional quotient, when you're shocked, when you're traumatized, when something happens unexpectedly and it captures all the brain's attention, the brain takes a picture. And when it takes a picture, it's correlating that picture with a feeling, the emotion from the experience. And what most people don't know is that every time they see that picture in their brain again, every time they reproduce that memory, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was occurring outside of them. And the brain does not know the difference between an experience in our life that produces an emotion and an emotion that we can fabricate by thought alone. So the body is the unconscious mind. It does not know the difference between an experience in your life that produces an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. So there's a chemical refractory period that's created after an emotional event. And most people don't know how to control their emotional reactions. And so these emotional reactions can tend to linger for hours and days and weeks and months and years. And over time, it's not the memories so much that the person is attached to, it's the feeling that's defined them as an individual. And so people's personalities, for the most part, are defined by feelings. And if feelings are familiar, and they're a record of the past, and those feelings are driving people's thoughts, then they get caught and trapped in these states of being. So then the person's not conscious of that. It's just that they've been mismanaging their thoughts and their emotions for a long enough period of time that that's ultimately become their personality. And now here's the problem. They tend to view and perceive reality through that lens of the past. And when they do that, they can't see possibilities in their future.
Please tell us about the placebo and placebo response and how does it work?
Well, placebo has been my interest now for some time because we have been witnessing in our workshops and conferences all over the world in the last 10 years that people were healing by thought alone, right in our events. So the question is, how is it that you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, or perform some false surgery or treatment, and a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought without any analysis that they're getting the real substance or treatment, and they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make the exact pharmacy of chemicals equal to the substance that they think they're taking. So the question is it the inert substance like the sugar pill that's doing the healing, or is it the body's innate capacity to heal? You see, that pill is a symbol that represents health. And that pill has been conditioned into the person into believing that pills can heal diseases. Why? Because conditioning is based on the past. So then if a person has taken a pill for the last 30 years, different types of pills to take away headaches, to take away indigestion, to help them to sleep, they begin to understand that that substance outside of them is changing their internal chemistry. And over time, they condition a belief into them. So now the doctor gives them a pill that looks like every other pill, but it's nothing but a sugar pill. And that person is told that this pill could actually heal them. And the moment they see that pill, they begin to create in the brain an image or a new possibility of some new future reality called getting well. And if they can combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, they start to get inspired, or they start to feel gratitude, or they start to feel enthusiastic. They begin to elevate their emotional state, and when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and if thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body, that person just moved into a new state of being. And all of a sudden, the autonomic nervous system begins to manufacture the exact chemicals equal to what the person thinks they're taking. So my question is, if you understand how the placebo works, number one, can you teach it? And number two, do you need that sugar pill or the saline injection? Or can a person begin to select a new potential in the quantum field by thought alone and begin to emotionally embrace that future reality before it's made manifest? So much so that the body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes and new ways to begin to change their very biology. So the exciting part about this is, for an example, 81% of people that are involved in placebo studies for depression, that are given a placebo, 81% of those people get better, and they're given the placebo. So when you look at the brain scans and you see the changes in people's brainwave function and their physiology, it's exciting because it means then if they're getting better, they're making their own pharmacy of antidepressants by thought alone. So then if you can teach people how to do that, you can eliminate their belief in something outside of them that's doing the healing, some known, and begin to select an unknown and revisit that unknown in mind and emotion over and over again to such a degree that that unknown finally becomes a known in their biology. And then will it begin to produce biological changes? And we've been very excited and mystified, in fact, by the number of people that have healed themselves from all kinds of clinical conditions that even at times medical science had no solution for. So they are beginning to tap the resources of the very power within them to do the healing, the body's innate capacity to heal.
Well, I am one of them who did that, but it's a long story. Bruce Lipton told me that 95% of medication are not having any effect, so they are almost like placebo.
Yes, I was just with Bruce last weekend. We were lecturing together, and we had a great panel discussion. The facts is that many medications work because of the placebo. Many medications are enhanced because of the placebo. And so the majority of those medications, like when you have systemic changes going on in your body, those chemical changes are targeted very specifically to specific organs and tissues. But when you're given a pharmaceutical, it doesn't know to go to a specific area, it goes to the entire body. And so a lot of times there's side effects that really aren't side effects, they're real effects. And so it's almost better for a person at times to take a placebo than to take a medication and experience a lot of those side effects.
In contrast with placebo, there is nocebo. Please explain what that is.
Well, the nocebo is kind of like that principle of seeing the glass half full or half empty. So if you give someone a sugar pill or a starch pill or a saline injection, and you tell them that you're giving them a medication, and there's measurable side effects from similar medications, they will begin to experience the adverse side effects from the medication that they think they're taking, but all they're taking, for the most part, is a sugar pill that's inert. So they begin to manufacture the very opposite effects, the side effects of the very drug they think they're taking, which is a very interesting conversation because a lot of those side effects lead to other medications that people take to handle those side effects. And here we go, it becomes more dependency on external substances.
Psychology and neurology discovered that at least 90% or even 95% of our personal ego or personality is created by automated, inherited or not, subconscious programs, and only about 5% we are using conscious thinking, creativity, positive thinking, if we like. But the other 90 to 95% don't know what positive thinking is, don't know how much unused power of healing we have, don't know how much biological resources we have. Please explain why on the subconscious level we have too many bad programs and nobody wishes to change them.
But think about this. Where most people learn their behaviors and their habits and their emotional reactions are either from their parents, their caregivers, or their exposure to technology and information and television. So what most people don't know is that children are so susceptible to information because of their brainwave patterns up until the time they're about 9 years old. So all information that's going into a child's brain is going in unedited and unanalyzed. And so as they begin to observe behaviors, the observation of behaviors begins to activate what's called mirror neurons in their brain. The mirror neurons in their brain are the very neurons they'll be using to demonstrate the same behavior. So as they watch their parents get emotional and react, as they watch their parents with bad habits, they're paying attention to their primary caregiver because that's where their focused attention is, and they begin to prime the very circuits in their brain and begin to select and ultimately instruct those neurological networks to become subconscious programs that will ultimately run them later on in their lives. Now, when you're watching television, your brain goes into alpha brainwave patterns, and you begin to move into a very suggestible state. As you move into a suggestible state, you can further program an individual because it begins to reduce their analytical or their critical facilities. The other part of that is that we tend to do certain things over and over again. We tend to think certain ways repeatedly. We begin to feel emotionally and react emotionally the same ways over time. And if you keep doing something over and over again, it becomes a habit. Now, a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through frequent repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body knows how to do it better than your brain. So now, most of people's unconscious habits and behaviors are stored in the body as the mind. So now the body becomes subconsciously programmed. So if the person has been subconsciously programmed to be negative their whole life and to feel guilty or unworthy, they can think positively all they want with the 5% of their conscious mind, but if they're feeling negatively, that's mind and body in opposition. So the challenge then is to recondition the body to a new mind. Now, why is this important? Why is it relevant? Because we use the model of meditation to begin that process of change. Because the whole process of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind and begin to slow your brain waves down so you can move into those subconscious realms and begin to change self-limiting thoughts or unwanted behaviors or limited emotional reactions into more healthy and more unlimited states. But you can't do it with your conscious mind. You have to learn how to get into the operating system where true change can take place. So then the majority of people's programs are stored in the body. What do I mean by that? Well, you may not be able to remember your PIN number, or you may not be able to remember a combination on a lock, or you might not be able to remember a phone number. But if you've dialed that phone number or done that PIN number so many times, you'll come a point where you won't be able to consciously remember it, but your fingers will move. Well, how does that happen? It happens because your body has done it so many times, it knows how to do it better than your brain. And that's where 95% of our programs exist, in that subconscious realm. Now think about this. That means then, if you're not present in the moment, then 95% of the time, you're unconscious and you're running a program. So then in order for you to change, the first step is to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. Become aware of your automatic habits and behaviors. Look and notice the emotions that you're feeling, and as you begin to observe those states of mind and body, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program, and that's how we begin to objectify our subjective selves. We're looking at ourselves through the eyes of someone else. And because of the size of the frontal lobe, the crowning achievement of the human being, that's the latest piece of neurological machinery we have, the seat of our conscience. That's what allows us to observe who we're being, to make changes to do a better job in life. And doing a better job in life and making changes is called neuroplasticity. Because every time you think differently, every time you choose differently, every time you behave differently, every time you create a new experience or a new emotion, there are neurochemical changes that take place in your brain that begin to reorganize the very architecture of who we think we are.
There is a metaphor that I'm remembering from my talks with Bruce Lipton, saying that when we stop thinking consciously, then the subconscious takes control, like an autopilot. And then we go on the back seat while the car, which is our body, is automated, driving itself on the autopilot mode. Can you comment on that?
Well, that's the way it is. I mean, for the most part, the body as the mind is making the majority of decisions for a person. Why? Because they want to cling to the familiar territory, because if they step into the unknown has always been considered a scary or dangerous place. So then, the moment you start a computer program, the moment you press go, that program runs automatically. So the moment you see your coworker and you judge your coworker or are competitive with your coworker, the moment you see that coworker, you have a hardware program installed, and it becomes a software program. So you see your coworker, all of a sudden the stimulus produces a response, and all of a sudden you run the program of competition or judgment. You see your friend, and you use your friend to reaffirm some addiction emotionally to suffering. The moment you see your friend, you turn on the program of suffering, and then both of you talk back and forth with each other, talking about how much you suffer. You see your ex-girlfriend, and all of a sudden you see her, and the next thing you know, you turn on the program of resentment, because that's how the program runs in the brain and body. So then, as people begin to react to different conditions in their life, or even to extraneous thoughts, they begin to activate these programs. And just like if you're running 20 computer programs on your computer, or your iPhone or your smartphone has at least 10 programs opened, you're going to drain the body's energy. You're going to drain the technology's battery source. So you have to force quit and begin to eliminate some of those programs. And that's what this work is about. When a person begins to no longer fire and wire those circuits in their brain, no longer create the same emotions that continuously signal the same genes, when they're able to find the present moment and begin to execute and regulate internal changes, if they do that properly for a consistent period of time, when they walk back out into their environment, they're less prone to have that program run automatically because they're aware of it now. So then the first step in getting back in the front seat is to do something really simple. Disconnect from your environment. Close your eyes. Sit up straight and no longer plug yourself into the external world. Play soft music in the background or put earplugs in to diminish that information coming in. Sit your body down and let it sit in the same place without doing anything or eating anything or smelling anything or tasting anything, and that eliminates more sensory information. Find the present moment instead of thinking about what you have to do in the next moment or what you did yesterday. Truly become present. And it's the mechanism of being able to settle the brain and body back into the present moment, disconnect from the environment, and to be greater than our bodies. That's when we begin to be defined by thought alone. And that's what meditation is about. So all of a sudden your inner world starts to become more real than your outer world. And that's when you can begin to assemble new neurological structures. That's when you can begin to intentionally signal new genes in new ways. So if the person has been thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking for 30 years, or getting up in the morning and running through the same routine behaviors that it did yesterday, then for the most part then, the body has become the mind. Then to change is to be greater than our bodies, to be greater than our habits, our unconscious programs, our emotional reactions and addictions, to be greater than our attitudes that are connected to past experiences, to be greater, for the most part, than the conditions in our environment, the people we know, the places we go, the things we do at the exact same time. And that begins to produce the same physical, biological, energetic, genetic changes in the brain and body when the person begins to know how to do this. But they have to be able to understand the science and the knowledge, because it serves as the forerunner for them to create different experiences.
This is why my TV program is called Science and Knowledge. The power of those 5% of the conscious mind which might tell us that this attitude is wrong is completely surpassed by the 95% of the power of the subconscious mind. Is there any chance to win this battle?
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt about that. We have seen so many people in the last 4 years begin to make measurable changes in their personality, measurable changes in their health, overcome very serious scars and traumas from the past, and really reprogram who they are. Now, I'm not going to say it's easy, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But as I said earlier, as you begin to understand the what and the why, the how gets easier. So in the work that we do, in the workshops that we teach around the world, we ask people to retreat from their lives, to get away from the constant stimulation that reminds them of who they think they are as a personality, to retreat from their lives long enough to learn some valuable science and knowledge and information. And then we set up the conditions for them to experience exactly what we've taught them. And we build model by model by model through knowledge and experience, and they begin to progress. No different than learning how to play tennis, or learning how to ski, or learning how to crochet. That you learn different steps and you keep building on those steps until it becomes a skill. And the research that we've done in measuring brain function, and measuring heart rate variability, and measuring genetic changes, and measuring people's energy and the energy of the room, we now know that people can absolutely do it. Our measurements show that it's not just taking place in their mind, it's actually taking place in their brain. And they're making those fundamental changes that tend to become more permanent. But the only way to do that is that you have to enter the operating system, and that's where meditation comes in.
Please elaborate more on a quote from one of your books, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. The quote is, "As long as we use our familiar feelings in response to our efforts of change, we will always convince ourselves that have to give up something big. We will never be able to grow superior inner thoughts. We will never see a world of possible results other than the negative from the past. So this is how powerful are the thoughts and feelings over us."
Yes, I think that when we use feelings, familiar feelings, as a barometer to change, like you say in the morning, oh, I'm going to work out this afternoon, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore, I'm going to stop drinking coffee, I'm going to wake up at 6 in the morning and get all my work done before work. You can say that with your conscious mind. You can declare that. But then when it comes time to actually do it, most people say what? I don't feel like it. I don't feel like getting up early. I don't feel like working out in the afternoon. I don't feel like not eating this food. I feel like eating sugar. So when you use feelings as a barometer for change, for the most part, you are going to talk yourself out of possibility. So then when you make that declaration and you say, I'm going to make these changes, get ready. Because the moment you say that, you're going to feel uncomfortable. And it's going to feel unfamiliar. And you're going to be uncertain. And there's going to be some unpredictability because you're stepping from the known into the unknown. And the hardest part about change, Christian, is not making the same choice as you did the day before and staying conscious while you're doing it. So the moment you go unconscious, you return back to the same thoughts, the same choices, the same behaviors, the same experiences. And why? For the same emotion, to reaffirm your identity. So then, let's say a person is so conditioned into suffering because they've had 4 or 5 serious events that happened in their life, and they create the belief that nothing ever good happens to me and you need to suffer, and that's what life is about. And you say to them, okay, well, you don't have to suffer. You can step out and create something differently and create a new life. That person may intellectually understand it, but when it comes time to make the effort, they are going to come up against those emotions. And when they come up against those emotions, they have to realize that those emotions are not them. Those emotions are chemical residue from the past. So the person then begins to climb on top of these emotions, and as they begin to overcome their emotional body, as they begin to overcome their emotional addictions, as they begin to overcome their emotional memories that are stored in the body, they literally begin to express new genes. and all genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and the function of the body. So all of a sudden now the person starts noticing a lot of their physical symptoms going away. They start noticing that they can think better, that they can feel better, that they have more energy, that they are excited about life again. And in a sense, from a biological standpoint, they're being reborn again. They're literally biologically being reborn. So we have seen changes in people's health, in their lives, in creating new opportunities, in mystical experiences, because in all of the research we've done, there's no doubt that I can tell you that people are at their absolute best when they get beyond themselves. When they get beyond their present identity, that's when they do the uncommon.
Please explain why simple positive thinking cannot overcome the negative subconscious thoughts and habits.
You will only accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts that are equal to your emotional state. And you will not accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts that are not equal to your emotional state. So if you're feeling guilty or unworthy, your body is in the emotional state, because emotions are the language of the body. The person's in the emotional state of guiltiness, guilty or unworthy, and they're thinking positively, and thought is the language of the brain. That thought will stop right at the brainstem and never make it to the body, because the body is conditioned emotionally into the past. So they can think positively all they want with their 5% of their conscious mind, but it's never making it into the body. Now, a person gets a diagnosis, some type of diagnosis, whether it's cancer or MS or lupus or Alzheimer's or whatever. They get that diagnosis, and the moment they get that diagnosis, they feel fear or they feel sadness. And they say, oh, I'm going to beat this condition. And now they say they're going to beat this condition with the 5% of their conscious mind, but they're not addressing what's in the operating system subconsciously. So if they think positively and they're feeling fear or they're feeling sadness, that thought is never going to make it to the brainstem and reach the body. So then if you take a person and you change their emotional state into a state of gratitude, into a state of inspiration, into a state of enthusiasm, if they can sustain that emotional state, they will accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to that emotional state, and they will begin to program their autonomic nervous system into a very different destiny. Now that's the challenge, because most people are waiting for their healing to feel gratitude, to feel wholeness. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their wealth to feel success. That's the old model of reality of cause and effect, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. But the new model of reality then is changing our inner state before the event, which means you have to feel gratitude and wholeness for your healing to occur. You have to feel abundant and successful for your wealth to come. You have to be in love with yourself and in love with life in order for you to attract relationships equal to that state. And so then it requires a fundamental switch in our reasoning and our thinking. And once you show people how to do this, they begin to make significant changes. So here's the questions. Can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the experience has already occurred? The latest research in neuroplasticity says you can change your brain just by thinking differently. And can you fall in love with a new possibility that already exists in the quantum field? And can you emotionally embrace that future reality before it's made manifest to such a degree that your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing that it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and you're signaling new genes and new ways to change your body to look like the experience has already occurred? Now reason this. If there's physical evidence in your brain and body to look like the experience has already occurred, physical evidence, it means that the event has already occurred. And this is when people begin to relax, and when they relax and surrender, that intelligence that's giving us life begins to change our body, and that same intelligence that's giving us life is that same intelligence that's causing all the functions of the universe to take place, begins to organize events in our life equal to a new state of being. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past, it's a map to the future. And the body is no longer anchored to the past because of those limited emotional states. The body is using those elevated emotions as energy to drive them to a new future. And I'm telling you, common people around the world are doing the uncommon just by practicing some simple principles.
Before we close the part 1 of our interview, I'd like to inform our viewers that they will have a very special opportunity to meet you in person in Bucharest, the conference on November 23rd, 2016 at Crown Plaza, Bucharest. Please tell us just a bit, what is the topic you wish to present there?
Well, it's an evening talk that I'm going to be doing in November, and my interest really is to show people how powerful they really are, to talk to them about the new science of possibility, to tell them what people are doing around the world in terms of healing themselves and changing their lives and creating better lives for themselves, and combine some quantum physics with a little neuroscience, with a little epigenetics to show people what they can actually do to create a better life for themselves.
Thank you very much for this amazing opportunity, and we meet again for part 2 of our interview next time.
Thank you so much, Christian.